part two of our discussion with Angela Kelly next on polygamy. What love is this? Welcome to part two of our discussion with Angela Kelly, who has recently become the new director of Sound Choices Coalition, which is a Utah nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness and working to end the damaging practices associated with the polygamous cultures, including children's rights, child abuse, trafficking, domestic violence, and polygamy. She was raised in the mainstream LDS church, which of course was the source of today's polygamy groups, even though they don't at this time practice it. So I would like to introduce again and welcome again our special guest, Angela Kelly.
Thank you.
And thank you again. We've got some interesting things to talk about this time. But we want to put your contact information on the screen there, which shows the Sound Choices Coalition and your contact information, where anybody who is interested can contact you.
Anybody, yeah.
They just have questions or
want to help. If you want to help, yeah,
or...
we're going to talk about some things during this that people definitely can get involved in. Definitely.
Good. Great. Great. So a few weeks ago you asked me if I had yet exploited the idea that the early Mormons had been told by Brigham Young to forget everything that they knew about marriage and just do the polygamy thing, the Mormon way of marriage, which I have dealt with that topic several years during the past 10 years that we've been doing this show. But actually it was Joseph Smith who first annulled all the marriages in early Mormonism, and then paved the way for people to go into the polygamy marriages, and that way they didn't have to get divorced, and so they could marry married people and all of this other nonsense that went on. But to get into this a little bit and exploit it just a little bit more, we have a quote from Brigham Young's ex-polygamous wife, Anne Eliza Young. So let's look at that quote, and then we can talk about it a little more.
And if you have not read this book, you need to read it.
Oh, it's a great book.
It's incredible.
It is.
I had not read a book, because I do a lot of research. So when you're researching, you just like pick and choose all the best parts, right? I hadn't read a book from cover to cover in years until this one. It's really hard to put down. It's also online for free.
It is.
Joseph not only paid his addresses to the young and unmarried women, but he sought spiritual alliance with many married ladies who happened to strike his fancy. He taught them that all former marriages were null and void, and that they were at perfect liberty to make another choice of a husband. The marriage covenants were not binding, because they were ratified only by Gentile laws. These laws the Lord did not recognize. Consequently, all the women were free. Again, he would appeal to their religious sentiments and their strong desire to enter into the celestial kingdom. He used often to argue in this manner while endeavoring to convince some wavering or unwilling victim. Now, my dear sister, it is true that your husband is a good man, a very good man, but you and he are by no means kindred spirits, and he will never be able to save you in the celestial kingdom. It has been revealed by the Spirit that you ought to belong to me.
So see, there's that coercion we were talking about in the first part one of this, where they use God and they use their desire to please God and get into heaven. And then they coerce them into doing whatever they want.
It's really the worst kind of coercion, I think. I think to use religion, and especially knowingly, knowingly use religion to coerce someone to do something that they would not do otherwise is just, it's wrong.
I agree with you, and that's what polygamy is, today's Mormon polygamy. And he was very successful in doing it, and of course they're doing it today. If the women in today's polygamy groups could understand this, and this is something that I think that you're going to be trying to accomplish in this Sound Choices Coalition, is if they knew that it was not God's will to live polygamy, that he never commanded it, it's not a way into heaven, they would run from it. And if women refused to live polygamy,
it would end.
It would end.
It would end. Now, empowering women to do that is definitely not easy, right? It's not easy. But you can't say, well, because it's hard, we're not going to try.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that's, you know, there are so many people that say, live and let live, let them do what they want. The more you realize how oppressed these people are, How dare you say that?
Right.
How could you say that? How could you say leave them? Let them live that way. They're oppressed.
That's right.
And they're oppressed so much so that they don't even know it.
They don't even realize
and
it.
They will never know it unless someone from the outside tells them. And as long as there's voices saying, "Oh, this is great,"
live and let live. Let them. If that's what they choose to do, let them do it.
I think it's horrible. I said
and
it.
The children.
I said it in one of my posts. I really feel like the organizations that are saying things like that, let's just go back to slavery in America and let's just start a nonprofit that says, let's just keep them slaves. And here's some things to help them be a little more comfortable. No, you wouldn't. Exactly. You wouldn't even dream of treating treating human beings like that. You would say, "There's freedom here. There's real freedom. There's liberty out here."
Yeah, and that is very, very true. The polygamy, people do not realize what actually is going on inside polygamy groups because they're believing the propaganda that sister wives and some of these other polygamy groups have
perpetuated for years and years and years, successfully, so successfully that, like you said, the women are there right now. If we can empower them, and that is something that we plan on doing,
and somehow convince them this is not what God ever wanted you to do. Okay, we have a second quote from that same book, and what she said about these Gentile marriages being annulled.
Some of these women have since said they did not know who was the father of their children. This is not to be wondered at, for after Joseph's declaration annulling all Gentile marriages, the greatest promiscuity was practiced, and indeed all sense of morality seemed to have been lost by a portion, at least, of the church.
So we can see the way it went when Joseph Smith annulled all the marriages. Anything goes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, anything goes, and so we have exploited this. We have talked about it. There's a lot about it in these older books.
In these older books
that they can find out about. Okay, so let's go on to another topic. On January 5th, a Sound Choices Coalition made a statement that the Mormon temple changes is a boost to fundamentalist polygamy cults. Explain what you meant by that. How does it boost them?
Every single time there's a change in the mainstream church, you will boost membership in the other organizations because they take that and they are now able to say, see, they are drifting away from the original teachings. And so then you're catering to the exact kind of people that are going into fundamentalism. Every time you make a change.
Every time you make a change. Because, and I've always said, they're the real Mormons. The polygamy groups are really...
Oh, they are.
They're the Orthodox. They are the genuine Mormons.
And no one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that. I remember not wanting to hear that.
Yeah.
And thinking, no way, that's not true. But all you have to do is, read The 19th Wife, read these older stories, read journal discourses. It's really plain as day. It's plain as day.
Right. And a lot of LDS people want the original teachings of Joseph Smith. And the only way they can get it is to go to the polygamy group.
Right, exactly. And that's what's so appealing. Right? I mean,
That's
not to me, but that's what is appealing. And that's what's, it's very disturbing every time the Mormon Church makes a change, knowing that when they do, they're perpetuating more memberships in these groups.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a whole other show.
Okay, so what changes in the ceremony? We just do briefly on this. Were made that is considered. Well, it's the endowment ritual that has boosted women's position in the ceremony, right?
From what I understand, it has, because I think they're no longer saying that the woman doesn't have to say, I now covenant to obey my husband as my husband covenants with God. I think that's
something
what
like
they
that.
changed. Something like that. I don't know.
Something like that. And I don't think they have to wear the veil or whatever. But at any rate, those are things that the polygamy groups still require in their specific ceremonies.
And that's another thing we need to make a wheel out of. Actually, that's actually on my list. That's actually on my list to take that endowment and plug it into that wheel as well. I think it will.
Wow.
It will show the same thing.
That's a great idea. I'm sure it will. Yeah, but that's a great idea, just showing it. So, why is the AUB specifically appealing to LDS members? Do you know?
I mean, I think I know why. Well, for one, you're already going to get those people that want to follow the original teachings of Joseph Smith. But the AUB group of all of the groups is considered to be like the most like mainstream, right? Like, I didn't even know this until recently. They don't even have a word of wisdom. They don't have D&C Section 89. So you can smoke and drink coffee and drink alcohol.
Some of the FLDS are that way too.
Yeah, so
some.
Yeah, some, but the AUB definitely.
Yeah.
You know, so I would think that would be appealing. You know, they're not wearing the prairie dresses. They're wearing normal clothes and they're out in society
But they still have the temple ceremonies, and they have
the Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon and
all
their
those
meetings
things.
and all of that stuff. And so they claim the Mormon Church is still an authorized version of God's church, but they've lost their priesthood because they gave up polygamy, so it's closest to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, another topic that you brought up was insane asylums for polygamist women, and I thought that was interesting. In fact, I think I'm going to do another show that deals more deeply in this, because we don't have time today. We wanted to get into some of the other stuff that you want to deal with. But there's a quote from Fanny Stenhouse. She wrote a book entitled Tell It All, and she talked about the asylum. There was actually an insane asylum specifically set apart when she was here, and this would be the late 1800s, 1885 and so on, that her husband had been shamed into polygamy. And
another incredible book, by the way.
It is a very good book by Brigham Young, and he had no intention of living polygamy, but ended up doing so because
he was persuaded as well and coerced as well, right? With his salvation,
with his salvation, and economically threatened, and so on and so forth. So we have this quote by Fanny Stenhouse from Tell It All.
Had I been treated with the cruelty and neglect which has fallen to the lot of so many unfortunate women in Utah, I should probably have been in my grave today, or in that asylum which has been provided by the church, situated on a lonely hill at a sufficient distance from the city, so that the cries of the unhappy, ill-treated, insane women should not be heard.
That makes you shudder.
It's terrible. It's totally terrible. And I've heard this is happening today as well. In fact, I still need to find him. I wish there were better search parameters within Gmail.
I'm telling you,
because I know it's in my
yeah.
email, but as far as being able to actually find that one, I actually have the name of one. It's not an insane asylum, because now they don't call them that now. They would just call it like a girls' group home.
Institution or something
institution.
like that.
I do actually have the name of one in my email, but I haven't been able to find it because I've been so busy with all this other stuff that we're going to talk about.
Well, I talked to some people from different polygamy groups and about this, and I'm promising, of course, not to use names and all of that because they want to stay anonymous. One person said that their latest tactic is to take an unruly minor daughter to an institution who takes all their privileges away, and they take away their shoes. They brainwash them into obedience, threaten them, and that they need to act right, and then they can earn their privileges back. And the longer it takes, it's to the establishment's advantage because it's very expensive.
Right.
And so if it takes a long time, they don't care. You know, they can still do it. And this will kind of change this teenager's idea of either running away from the group or getting involved with a boy they don't want her to get involved with. And this is usually young teenage girls who are being targeted for a plural marriage. So that is happening there. One other person answered my request, and this one was from the Kingston group, said that they have used institutions for troubled teens multiple times, and that since the institution is involved in and motivated by money, the longer it takes, again, the same thing, the longer it takes, that's to the advantage of the program, the better it is for them.
Yeah.
Another one said she was involved and she wouldn't even tell me anything about it. She just said she knew for a fact that it was involved. So a troubled teen that they're referring to here is a young girl who is targeted for a plural marriage, usually to an older man or abusive man, and she wants out.
A little rebellious, right?
Quite rebellious. That's exactly what I was. I didn't want to have any part of it, and I was very rebellious. But I waited till I was 18, then I ran, and they couldn't stop me at that point.
Yeah.
Had I been younger, I probably would have been in one of these things.
It's just terrible. And it's interesting because there's a lot of places like that in Utah.
Yeah, There's
a lot of places like that. I mean, people from all over the country send their children here. It makes you wonder.
Read some things about that too. I know the Harmston group, Manti, they would issue their wives, their troubled wives, plural wives, antidepressants and put them in Never Never Land mentally so that they couldn't complain or, you know, rebel too terribly much about the treatment that they were receiving. Just this morning, and then we're going to get to the legislative issue, and this is kind of a segue into it. In today's paper this morning, South Dakota has reportedly brought to the legislature a new law that will that requires birth and death reporting, because in Pringle, South Dakota, the FLDS has a community there, much like their compound was in Texas, and that all the 10 years or more that they have been there, they have never once reported a birth or a death.
Wow.
And so they're making it a requirement to report all the births and all the deaths that has been reported. That's going finally to their legislature.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
Because
wow.
that's their first, the article said this is the first aggressive effort that they've made towards the FLDS up there, although they've got a lot of complaints. So that brings us into the legislation of what's going on in Utah. You know, we're getting some points being made here toward polygamy groups. What's going on with the Utah legislation and some stuff that you're involved with?
Well, so I'm assuming this is where we talk about House Bill 214.
Yes.
Yes. So this is some incredible legislation. It's just, you see, I'm already getting excited. I kind of have like it feels like Christmas inside, just thinking about what it will do.
What it will do.
Basically, what it will do is it will allow people, anyone leaving polygamy, to access the Utah Office for Victims of Crime Reparations Fund. So
Which is already there.
It's already there. It's
Right.
already in place. So we're not asking for any money. Every state has a reparations fund. It actually comes from federal dollars. So like when people are convicted of a crime, they're fined. And a portion of that fine goes into this fund for victims of crime. So currently, there's actually a list of crimes that would qualify you. And this bill, House Bill 214, has added I don't know the exact terms, but it's added bigamy, so that those who are leaving, you don't need any other crime involved. You don't need domestic violence, you don't need child abuse, you don't need sexual assault, no other crime. You can leave your community and you can access those funds that are available to 7,000 other victims in Utah.
Right. Bigamy being a felony.
Bigamy being a felony, that's a huge part of it. And what's really cool is this fund, it covers things like emergency housing and counseling. And that's exactly what they need.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Too many women, especially, again, we're going to the women, they will leave, and they'll leave because the abuse is so horrible. Some of them leave because my daughter's getting old enough, and I don't want her to go through what I went through.
Right.
And so they will need to get out, and they'll need to get out quickly before their husband finds out what their plans might be, but they have no place to go. They have no money to go there. They leave everything behind. How can they pay rent? They don't have a job. They're not educated. What are they going to do?
Right. So that's why this is so beautiful. It's just really beautiful. And I think it's black and white. The people that leave these groups are leaving everything, and there's not a single there's nothing that the state is doing to help them when they leave.
Right.
Yes, we have organizations like Holding Out Help that are doing phenomenal things for these women and providing shelter and temporary housing and stuff, but to be able to have people individually and organizations tap into this, not because of any other crime.
Right. Right.
It's great.
Well, actually, it's a turnaround. It's actually almost 180 because when they leave, and we've talked about this before, they are re-victimized. We talked about that in Nicole's interview too, because they can leave because of domestic violence or whatever, but the polygamy group and the husband has the power. They have the resources, and so they can set these women up to fail,
and they know
and then use it against them and twist it in court.
And part of that fund too does go to legal fees,
which is
they will cover legal
desperately
fees.
needed.
So the ins and outs of it are not all figured out, but the basics of it, it's really only changing one line in there. It's not asking for funding. We're not asking to prosecute polygamists, We're saying
Right.
help those who are leaving.
Right, right.
They
right.
need our help.
Do you have, or are any of your future goals to maybe find a way to provide better legal help for the women who leave? That's one of the biggest problems I've come across in
It's going to be a
helping some
huge
of them
problem,
out.
and it's frankly a huge problem in just domestic violence as well.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. We have to. The thing with law is it's baby steps, and they're really baby steps, and it's difficult that it's baby steps, but these groups are very powerful. Mm-hmm. These groups have,
They are.
I mean, almost endless money.
That's right.
But like we talked about before, you know, one of the most important things we can do as Sound Choices Coalition and as community members is empower these women. Mm-hmm. We can talk all day and all night. Enforce the law. Enforce the law. Enforce the law. We have lots of laws on the books that people
Right.
break every day.
Right.
There's child abuse. There's all these other things, right? But until you empower a victim who's being victimized,
And let them know that that victimization is not normal.
right, that it's not okay. I mean, we live in the world, and we live in an imperfect world, and there's a lot of people, and there's not enough law enforcement, and there's a lot of things that go into stuff like that. So,
Do you see in this legislation, do you see anyone coming up against any of the legislators or maybe even the local LDS influence? Do you see them coming up against this or influencing it negatively?
what I think at face value, I mean, if you look at this face value, anyone that votes against this bill is not nice. They are not nice. We are asking you to help the women and children, boys and men, who are leaving. We're asking you to open
Just
up
to be
funds.
more inclusive.
Just be
in
more
this,
inclusive.
in this the law. That's
Just be more
already there.
inclusive. And in fact, last year's theme for the National Victims Crime was something like include all victims. I forget what the slogan was, but I'm going to be using it in some of my posts. Mm-hmm. But that's what they talked about was, you know, do we really want to, especially when you're talking about those in polygamy who are leaving everything. They're leaving everything. They don't have a mother-in-law out here or a long-lost aunt or what, you know.
Right.
So for those that would go against it, I just think they're mean. Will there be opposition? Of course. There's like
especially the
opposition and
pro-polygamists.
everything.
That you believe the pro-polygamists will come up against it?
I think they will, but I think it will be laughable because the pro-polygamist groups do currently access these funds. These funds they access under other like terms, right? They'll say, well, we need these funds for the domestic violence that's happening within polygamy. They're still accessing hundreds of thousands of dollars from that same fund. Mm-hmm. So for them to come up against this would be laughable. It'd be laughable.
Well, stranger things have
But they're not
happened
going to
in
like
Utah.
it. They definitely won't like it. And I
Yeah.
think the leaders definitely won't like it because it's empowering these women who are leaving.
Yeah. Do you have any plans or suggestions on how to get the information to these women that you can talk about? I know you've got plans
Yeah.
that you're not ready to talk about yet, but
Yeah, I probably don't want to mention that just yet. We're still brainstorming. We do have some really good ideas, and we have some things that have been used in other areas. For example, for reaching human trafficking victims.
Yeah.
Things that have been successful in that. But we realize this is an extremely sensitive topic for everyone involved, even
Right,
for me
right.
as someone who never lived it.
well, you say that when the polygamists leave, they leave everything. Not only do they leave everything, their family, their clothing, their homes, their reputation, all of it, they also believe they're leaving God.
Right.
And any chance of eternal life. That is another that is never addressed except for this ministry that we're involved in, that I'm aware of anyway, I should say.
Right.
That's not directly addressed within the ministry, that they actually, some of them will not leave because they're afraid of losing their salvation.
Oh, definitely. And that's what I was saying. That's what's so cruel about this patriarchal polygamy that Joseph Smith invented. To take salvation and your family, your children, like, it's just evil.
It is evil. It is evil. And I lived through it. When I left, when I ran away, I knew I had run away from any chance of ever going to heaven. I knew that.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
actually,
I did cry, guys.
Yeah. Hey, that's
Zoom out on the camera, okay?
It's true. It is a heartbreak.
It's just evil. It's the worst kind. And that's why back before Utah was a state, when they talked about polygamy and slavery, that's why they linked them together. This patriarchal polygamy that's here in Utah, that stemmed here, started with Joseph Smith, it is akin to slavery in every way.
It is.
It is harmful in every way.
Well, and it goes back to the liberty that you explained. They live in a free country. They don't know they're not free. They don't know that they are oppressed. There's no way I would have known I was oppressed until I got out. Someone says, you don't know you're brainwashed when you're brainwashed.
Right.
And until you get out, and then you have to relearn some things.
So, I know we're almost out of time, but like we've said just here the last few minutes, we really will be focusing on reaching these people. So for those that are listening that want to help, there are going to be lots of ways that you can help, and we're going to need lots of people who are doing it for the right reasons.
For the right reasons.
If you're not doing it for the right reasons, don't message me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to work with you.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to do it for the right reasons. You have to have a heart, and you have to really love this cause and love these people.
And be willing to
But you have to stand up for what's right. You have to stand up for what's right and for what's true. And it's wrong. It's wrong what Utah has allowed to happen.
What they've allowed to happen, that's true. Some people say, well, they ought to be ashamed, and I think you've said that too, but you know what? I don't think they've got that shame. I don't think they get it. I don't think they get it. Well, we are out of time.
That went by
Angela,
so fast. Well, I'll have to come back.
Yes, you've got an open invitation. Anytime something new comes up or we want to talk about, or even if we want to get in detail on that wheel, let's do it. I would love to do it, and I'm sure our viewers would love to have more of your insight into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We do thank Angela Kelly for her efforts to bring her own special expertise into the conversation of Mormon polygamy. There's a proverb that tells us to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves, and many Christians apply that to the issue of abortion. But we can also apply it to victims who are caught up in Mormon polygamy through no fault of their own. They were born in it, they were raised in it, thoroughly brainwashed in it, and too many of them die believing that living polygamy purchased their own personal ticket into heaven. But all they need to do is to take up the Bible and read the story of Jesus. He is the only Savior, and only Jesus Christ can save a sinner. Polygamy was never taught by the Savior on how to be saved. And we do pray that this message will reach all those who have ears to hear. Thank you for watching.